Hello everyone! Another vlog post by Katrina McHyde on Tim and Katrina McHyde's channel called On the Narrow Path. Back today. I was gone for a few days. I went to a workshop this weekend and had a wonderful time at the workshop. And now I'm back doing another post. You know, it's funny. I spent probably an hour sitting here because I had three things I wanted to talk about at the same time tonight. I get backed up with ideas and these little things that like sort of kind of go together, but you kind of have to split them up because it's talking about too much. Anyway, I didn't know what I was going to do completely, and so I was sitting here trying to figure it out, and I said, why am I doing this? I just show up and start talking and something great comes up. Something comes up. So I just welcome anyone that comes in during this time that I'm making it, and excited for anybody that shows up. I see one person coming on, and it's been great. Like I said, every time I've done one of these, someone's shown up at least, and it's been a lot of fun. So I'll probably continue to do, look at that. Hi, Felicia. I'm glad I caught you too. Yay! I'm a little earlier today because I decided to take a day off of work. My son, Caleb, has been on and off all weekend on if he's moving or not. And so I took tonight off thinking I was going to help him move, and it looks like tomorrow. So that didn't happen during the weekend, but I got to go to a workshop anyway, so that was really fun. So with that, I am on a little earlier, so if people are catching me, it's pretty amazing, a little earlier, because usually people probably are not getting off of work quite yet. So on a Monday, that's pretty awesome. So thanks for showing up for the ones that do, and thank you for the comments that everybody's been leaving. It's very helpful to hear how things are hitting you, what we're talking about, how significant it is to you, if it's encouraging you, if it helps bring up questions in your daily walk, trying to just figure out life in general. So the thing that came to mind, we had a meeting, a fellowship meeting yesterday, and one of the things that we talked about was just the idea of bad things happening to good people. And I was just recognizing that it doesn't matter if you're righteous or unrighteous, or suffering's going to be. But the thing that we wonder is what's interesting to me is how we judge one another on if we're doing well or not. Like, are we is someone poor? Is someone the law coming after them for whatever reason, and you don't know why the law's coming after them, or it's unclear why the law is coming after them? And many times there's a lot of innocent people where the law is coming after them, or somebody is coming after them. Maybe it's happening to you. Maybe you're losing your home. Maybe you're having difficulties in your community with reputation. All these type of situations that happen, they're important to us because it's about our safety. Number one, what people think, I know. But the other thing, I think it's interesting how we know that because we ourselves judge others by that. We judge others by what's going on for them. So many times I know it's easy to kind of like judge the poor for being poor. Well, they should handle their money better, or they shouldn't have made some of those choices to become, that made them poor, or we have all of these different things where we justify our position. And I think we do that because we're scared that maybe it could happen to us. And we wonder if we're good or not. So I wonder even if we question if we're good or not. I've been running into a lot of people and lately that are having difficulties in life right now. And it seems that the commonality is in those difficult situations, they feel abandoned. And that maybe God has left them, Jehovah has left them, or leaving them in a bad position. And I think that's an assumption. I think that's the way we probably look at other people and how we treat one another here on this earth, or maybe the way we've been treated. But I wonder if maybe our way of viewing things could be maybe off. Maybe I think that whether a person is doing good or bad should not um, sway us in understanding what they're going through. Like having compassion for just how hard it is to be in the flesh, how hard it is to suffer and try to overcome things. And know that Jehovah's got to step in for everyone. We are in a fallen world. But I think what I'm trying to say, which I'm not saying very eloquently tonight, obviously, but I was thinking about Paul. So back in 1 Corinthians, Paul, when he talks about what his life was like, even as an apostle, he got an apostle, right? So I think we romanticize, I've talked about this before, how we romanticize those people in the Bible as having some kind of famous life, kind of like what we understand now with YouTube or with TV and things. And so we kind of make these icons out of people in the Bible. We don't recognize that they were having very human problems just like us. They were facing reputation problems. They were facing persecution. They were facing feeling abandoned. They were facing problems. And even when they were righteous, sometimes for decades, sometimes for their whole lives, they had just a hard life. And sometimes we don't really equate that with the fact that we're having a hard life, and then we think we're abandoned and that God is treating us different than he treated the people in the Bible. And you wonder, well, I wouldn't allow my kids to go through that or myself to go through that if I were God. And so we make all these different judgments on it. One thing that strikes me every time I read it, and I brought this up before, is how Paul says to the Corinthians, it's of course part of a huger context, but this is the way it was for him. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 9. For I think God has displayed us, the apostles, right? So the apostles we all know are like supposedly these woo-woo people, in last place, like men condemned to die. So when you're condemned to die, you're on death row, men on death row. We have become a spectacle to the world and to angels and to men. We are fools for Christ, but you are wise in Christ. So the Corinthian people seem to be respected, but the apostles and Paul was looked down on. And he says, we are weak, but you are strong. And the Corinthians were a more affluent church. So I think that has something for us to consider as well, that it seems that affluence can possibly breed this hierarchy of the people that are better than other people. And many times it seems maybe in affluence, I'm just putting this out as a possibility, that we look at it like the good people are doing better, in our circles, as far as the Bible believers, that the ones that are doing really good financially must be approved by God better, and the ones that aren't doing so well financially or with the law or whatever are they're still our brothers and sisters, but there's something wrong with them, and that's why God has abandoned them. And so he actually is coming against that type of mentality and thinking that's happening in the Corinthian church. I think it's a great warning for us. And he's recognizing that in the world in general, this is the way Paul was looked at, and he was apostle. And he goes on here and shows that you are distinguished, but we are dishonored. So the apostles themselves were dishonored. Up to this present hour, we are both hungry and thirsty. So they weren't well taken care of, and they were still doing God's work and doing it strongly. We are poorly clothed. So what do we think about people when we think we are poorly clothed, or when other people are poorly clothed? What kind of judgments do we have on that? um, well, you're not taking care of yourself, or you're not well manicured and things. We do. And, I think we all do it. I think that it would be disingenuous to think we don't. But to really pause and put a break on realizing, if we're thinking that, to also put in, but Father loves this person because they're in his image, and they may not be able to take care of themselves, they may not have the tools to do it or whatever, but that doesn't make them less valuable because of that. And if you're like that, if there are things that you're poorly clothed, I think that our value should not be placed on if we're well clothed or not. I mean, if an apostle himself is poorly clothed, I don't think it counts to say that just because you're poorly clothed that you're nothing or worthless or even abandoned by Father, because obviously the apostles were not abandoned by Father, but they were allowed to suffer really hard. It says roughly treated. Are you roughly treated? Many times when we're roughly treated, we think that we are doing something so wrong, and sometimes it's just not because you're doing something wrong. Sometimes just bad things happen to good people. And it doesn't make you a bad person just because you're being roughly treated. And it makes you want to cry out for more help and feel helpless. And therefore, with that helplessness, go to Father and find hope in him, that he won't leave you in the middle of it. He'll be in it with you. He won't always take you out of the fight. He won't always take you out of the troubles. Many people, we were talking in the fellowship, how people are in bad situations for decades or for a lifetime. And in a walk on the narrow path, don't expect it to be all pretty all the time. It's not like that. Sometimes you'll pray for years before you get an answer. And sometimes you won't know till the next life what's going on. So that can't be what we're focused on fully, to know if we're on the narrow path or not. It says homeless. So Paul himself is homeless? This is amazing, right? How do we think of the homeless? How do we think of ourselves if we have been homeless? Or how do we think of others when they're homeless? I think that's another thing of where we may judge things. And it's to recognize it's okay, don't feel guilty that this comes up all the time in your thoughts. But capture the thoughts, take it into captivity, and then when you hear them, say, well, that's interesting that I'm thinking that way. What would God think about that? And obviously, I'm trying to help to orient that if Paul was like that, then Jehovah isn't as focused on whether you're homeless or you have a home or not, to be a good person. That means you're a bad person or a good person. That's not what he looks at. He looks at the heart. So it says this is how Paul reacts. And I think this is where we can learn a lot about where we're at. If we are reviled, how do we handle when we're reviled? What does that mean? It means that those people that think we're disgusting and try to get away from us and just don't want any part of us, just really don't feel good, and they slander our name, they drag us through the mud and everything else. How do we respond to that? He says when we are reviled, when he was reviled, we bless. So that he says that the apostles, they bless instead. So they might be rejected, but they don't reject others, which is pretty difficult to do when you're reviled. So that's a part of love, which Paul is very strong about love. This is actually a letter where 1 Corinthians 13 exists, right? It's a whole letter. It wasn't 1 Corinthians 13 back then. It was one full letter, and it talked all about love. And of course, this is all within the context of that. When we are persecuted, we endure it. So we go through persecutions, and sometimes we go through it from our own family members. Sometimes we go through it in our communities, in our churches, unfortunately, or within people that say they're believers. It can happen anywhere. And so how do we endure it? Are we giving up? It says we endure it. How did they endure it? Well, Paul understood that this life is temporary and these problems are temporary. They really are. And we will gain stuff out of having these experiences. And it takes, like I said, it takes faith to believe. I've said this many times. It takes faith to believe that these experiences are meaningless and I'm a poor worm and they're happening to me because I deserve it and I must be a terrible person and that's why it's happening to me. Beat yourself up. There's just as much faith believing that, and it takes a lot of strength to believe that, when you could believe by faith as well that you're just having a human experience. It stinks, it's terrible, but there's a purpose to it and you don't know what it is yet, but it does have purpose, and that Father Jehovah will make it right in the end. He is a just God. And we look at everything that, for instance, Joseph went through to be trained and prepared to be able to fill the position he was. And David, he was trained as well. And we look at Moses, he was trained. All these people were trained. Yeshua himself was trained. He had different things that he experienced. I mean, he was born into a very, very poor household. They were very poor. So we have many places that we can see that people haven't had the easiest life. When we are slandered, we respond graciously. So do we have to return in? I think this subject is the hardest thing for me. I have to remind myself all the time, Father hasn't forgot me, even though it might look that way. Exactly. I mean, that's what we think is, from our point of view, it looks like we're abandoned, and you know what, from everybody else's point of view, it looks like we're abandoned too. And that's what's really hard. It's a big struggle, because when you believe the same thing, you have that reputation about yourself, you have that reputation about others that go through what you're going through, and others have that same idea about you. You get in this place of hopelessness. And I think we're seeing as we see, or as others see, at a human level, and not seeing as Father sees. And of course, I talk about this all the time in Revelation chapter 3, how the Messiah told the Laodicean church that it's really important that you ask for salve for your eyes. Now, what does salve do? It means there's damage in your eyes. You're not seeing properly. And so this is one of the things and tools, I think, that we're not seeing properly. We're not seeing as Father sees. We're not seeing ourselves as Father sees. And I think it's arresting our growth and also making us weaker and weaker. There have been lots of people, I've noticed this myself, like I said, I've come out of severe depression. So I know what it's like to be there. And the thing is the self-beating and the beating that you take of other people's opinion of you just makes it hard. When a person suffers, other humans abandon the one who is suffering. This magnifies the pain. Exactly. I mean, King David would absolutely agree with you. If you listen to all the stuff he went through, he understood abandonment by the people that were the closest to him. His own parents didn't show up for him really well. They didn't even take him. I mean, when a prophet comes to town, that is a big deal. And to be told to have the whole town come in and consecrate themselves to be able to do sacrifices to Jehovah with him, that was a big deal. And yet David wasn't even told. He was kept out there in the field and not even considered a son. I mean, that's just crazy. And it wasn't even better. He talks about in some of his Psalms how even his mother and father rejected him. And of course we know King Saul did. And of course we know his wife was taken, and actually his wife, Micah, was upset with him and was rejected by him at one point as well. So he knows what that's like. And he was running. I mean, he was running from King Saul. He was seen as, for years and years and years, as an outlaw. He was the son-in-law to the king, but he was seen as an outlaw, and they ran after him forever and ever. And yet we read those stories, And we think, well, God never left him. When we read it, it's like this Bible story, and that we know God's there, and he's going to win, and we know the end of the story. But, when you're right in the middle of your own story, many people, they don't take that hope in Jehovah being there like David did. I think David's a great example for those who are suffering great things, and maybe being poor, maybe running from the law, maybe having being abandoned by parents, or even beaten and hurt. All those different things. I think David's a great story for that. And how he responds is completely different than most of us do. Most of us give up, go in a corner, and just try to not be seen, or we become very angry and we put out our anger on others. I think that's the way we handle those situations, instead of, third option, possibility, of looking up and saying, Father, you're going to make this right, and you're in this with me, and this really hurts. I admit it, but I don't believe that you've abandoned me, even though it feels like I'm going through tough things and I feel abandoned. I'm going to believe in you. I'm going to stay strong in you. And this is what Paul's talking about when he says, when we are persecuted, we endure it. David saw his problems with eyes of faith. He said, God saved me from the bear, not as I would. Yeah, exactly. When the bears attack us, you're right. That's exactly what happens. We decide that God definitely has abandoned me, or he wouldn't allow the bear to touch me like that. And David says, I got this, somehow I got the strength from Father, and I went right in there and I saved a sheep right out of the bear's mouth and out of the lion's mouth, and Father gave me the strength to do it. Now that was a struggle. It was hard, and it really happened before he ever met Goliath. So we have an opportunity when we're going through very difficult things. We can either go back and say we're being attacked by the enemy, or we're being unfairly treated, or our parents didn't like us, so we're nothing, or we're nothing just because we're nothing. We're not as skilled as King David. But King David wasn't skilled. You got to understand, he was a shepherd boy. I know that most people don't get what a shepherd boy is. I mean, I've lived in the country. I know what the country is like. They work hard. Many people in the country, it's not like they're city slickers that have great education. They're out there having to take care of just surviving. So if you're out there taking care of sheep, you've got many hours in the weather when it's really hot, really cold, rainy, snow, whatever. You're out there, and you're out there alone. And you're taking care of a bunch of things on your own, and mosquitoes are biting you. You're watching out for snakes. You're having to think on your feet of how to take care of your own health and the health of the sheep around you, and the goats and whatever else, flocks that he was tending. So, it seems really, in truth, it's like a boring life. He had a lot of time to have an instrument and play. You see all those westerns with the cowboys and how, they've got their guitars. Well, yeah, they had a ton of time on the road, on the trail, I should say. Tending to things that out in the middle of nowhere, sometimes by themselves or with one other person. And so, but with that, he trained his heart to still believe in Father with all of the things that he faced out there on his own. So he felt alone. He would feel alone sometimes. So he used music, and he used a way to recognize that Father was with him in the middle of that, and not get downhearted or think that he was nothing just because he was doing a menial job. And so I think sometimes we look down on ourselves by, our profession and other things, and we just look at it, I think, upside down and wrong. I don't think that Father wants us to look at those things. I think that whatever we're experiencing, it's kind of like the movie Karate Kid, right? So with Karate Kid, many of you have seen it, but probably the new version and the old version. Daniel's son, he didn't understand what he was being trained for. He didn't understand that the menial tasks that he was being given was training him for something. And I'm telling you, everything you're going through, as menial as it seems, and as poor as you are, or the type of persecution you're having in your life, can be training. And you can be a good person and not have done anything wrong, and still be suffering for decades just because you're in training. And actually, if you look at many of the people in scripture that Father uses, he allows them just to have a human experience that's really, really hard with hard things. And it ends up being training. It helps build their compassion, gives them the opportunity to push into faith in things that other people decide to be hopeless in. They decide to find hope in Father in. So you have a choice and a decision on by faith what you're going to choose to believe in this situation. And he goes on to say, Paul goes on to say, even now we are like the world's garbage, like dirt everyone scrapes off their sandals. So if you're feeling that way, the enemy, what the enemy tries to do, what Satan really tries to do, is make you feel insignificant, unlearned, not good enough, not pretty enough, not clothed well enough, have a poor reputation, think that it's all about these things, how much money you have, how much money you don't have, if you've got a good family, if you come from a divorced family, or you've been adopted, or you've been orphaned, whatever. They look at all of these things and make judgments, and we make judgments about ourselves on all these things. And Father sees someone that he wanted from the very, very, very beginning. He had a plan, the Messiah. He had the plan of the Messiah before the foundations of the world were ever created. He already had a plan for every single human that would ever be born. And since you're born and you're listening to this, you're one of them. And so you are super valuable. And I think we don't treat ourselves with as much value as we should, or one another with as much value, just as 1 Corinthians with what Paul was trying to tell the Corinthians during that time. So I'm bringing this up just because I believe that from my perspective, and it may be only mine, I see that the world is changing very rapidly from my perception, from here in Germany where I'm at. And I think that there's going to be stronger and stronger judgments. I believe I've seen that in my lifetime, that there's stronger and stronger judgments coming on. But, the world's becoming a little scarier as far as wars and rumors of wars and stuff right now. And when people get scared, I think they judge even more. And we start tearing at each other when we're more stressed and things are more difficult. And it's harder to be on the narrow path of being, as Paul said here in Corinthians, to be kind when you're reviled, and labor working with your own hands, and deal with maybe being homeless or poorly clothed and all those things. I think it's more difficult to be in love God with your whole heart, might, and soul, no matter what, because he does love you, even if you don't understand his love and why you're going through it. You can believe that or not, and live by it or not, but that's the part of being on the narrow path. And you show that you love God by loving your neighbor as yourself. And if you have problems with loving yourself and loving your neighbor because you can't see yourself as God sees you, then you're going to have problems when things get more stressed. And so that's when we grow, is when we're stressed. If you're stressed out and life is more difficult for you right now, it's time to go slower and breathe, and realize that now that you're doing a heavier weightlifting, just as David did, running from Saul, King Saul, just as Joseph did in the dungeons and in slavery, just as many of the other people in Scripture, including Paul and the apostles, and all our brothers and sisters who have been martyred so far. There's going to be a major martyring happening on this earth again towards the true believers. And can you handle that elegantly? I think we're being prepared for that. I think we're being given opportunity in each individual life to be able to have things come up to strengthen us in certain areas. So if your life seems like you're losing jobs, if it looks like you're having difficulties financially, or you don't have the right education, or whatever you want to hit, the proper family, whatever. I don't. You can name whatever you think is the worst and the most imperfect in your life right now. all of those things you can bring to Father and ask him to help you in it, just as David did, and just as Joseph hoped in, and Abraham hoped in. And know that Father, he allows you to go through hard things, but he allows those things to build skills in you. Just saying hi. Yeah, that's great. Hi, it's good to see you. Wow, another traveler came on. You're always posting here and there. I really appreciate your comments. Anyone that comments, I just really love them because it helps me to know what to make. So if you have other ideas that you would like me to speak on, then you're welcome to leave comments, or even good. Thank you. Yeah, it's good to read you. Another traveler saying it's good to hear me. It's a lot of fun to do this way, isn't it? To have a little interaction on live. It's really fun way of doing it, and I'm really glad to do it. I believe that sometimes I think I've gone through Tim. Tim is doing good. He is growing by leaps and bounds, and we are really getting some ideas down for the next book. It's really coming together well as far as the ideas. He's working on some newsletters now, and he's been working on them for a few weeks. He wanted to get them out, but he tries to really go from the heart of inspiration. And so he's been working out. You can pray for him on that, because it's coming a little slower than we would all like, but it's coming out really good. So I'm excited about the things that we're going to be able to put out soon. He's doing well. He is healthy, and he's still actually, he's been trying to lose some weight just for health reasons. And he's doing really good with that, and been actually walking a lot. And it's getting colder here, and believe it or not, he's found that being more cold actually burns more calories. So he goes out in the middle of winter in his shorts. That's Tim. He doesn't do anything normal, which we don't want him to, because that's what makes him unique and able to see things. So he's doing well. Everyone's doing fine. We all are healthy. Thank God. We're healthy for the moment. Can't wait for the new book. I will be praying. We can't either. We're so excited. The things that we're learning, and what Father is putting us through to learn, to be able to talk about things like this. I know what it's like. What I'm talking about are things that I've faced myself, kind of gone through myself at times. And so it's really important to me, because I think that I just wish I would have had more people in my life that were able to reach into my life and say, hey, it's all part of the plan. It's okay. God is still there. Whatever's going on, God is still there. Even if you're going through hard things, keep going, keep going. It will get better. You will feel better even if your situation doesn't change. You will be changed in your situation, and you can feel better even in your situations that don't change. So it can happen. And one of the things that I did for years and years and years and years, and still do, but it's a thank you and a praise now than it is an ask. But I remember growing up, and most of the time I asked for peace. I asked God constantly growing up, from a young child into my teenage years, into my 20s, into my 30s. I just want peace. And I started, after many breakdowns, as you've heard already, I've said it many times, I started to get more peace, and that peace only came from hope and belief that all of this meant something, and that God really was good, and I could trust him. And I had to be broken down to get to that point. And then after I started getting more peace and getting that, I recognized that I really didn't have any genuine joy. And so then I had to start working on genuine joy. So I started praying over and over about joy, because I didn't understand genuine joy. And that's a whole nother topic. See, that's something else I wanted to talk about. But I'm at the point here where if I talk more, some people like longer posts and some like shorter posts. That's a whole new topic. We'll talk about joy another time. Hey, I have 4 people on here. Do you have anything else? What you're doing really well. You connect very well with people, which is so good. I love people. I love you. I really do. And I want to cry almost, just because I know how hard it is to go through life. It's hard to have a human experience. It really is hard at times. And, but you can go through it with more hope and more joy of believing that there's something to all this, and everything you're going through does not make you abandoned or make you totally bad. And even if you're doing bad things, it doesn't make you bad. It makes you learning. It makes you weak. And in your weakness is Father's strength. What that means is that we need Father's strength, and we hope in his strength to come and help us. We know that we're already stuck on our own and we can't get through it on our own. And so once you know that, you don't become defeated. You become hopeful that he will use his power. And it may take some time to help get us out. But many times the way that he gets us out is methodically. It takes time. Sometimes it takes years to get over things. And so we have to be willing to be okay with the patience it takes to learn how to get out of where we're at the moment. And so I'm still on the path of being healed like everyone else. And I think that's always a human thing. I think we're always learning and growing. I think Paul, all the way to the end of his life, was learning every single day and learning how to more deeply love and what it meant, and learning what it was to serve, and learning how it was to respect yourself as a king's child, even having a difficult experience in a foreign land, remembering who you are. So those are the type of things that that have helped me to stabilize me in my life, and to find more meaning, and to truly have more compassion for you. I have more compassion for myself and for the world. And I think that's what it meant in Hebrews, that of what the Messiah, everything that he suffered, that he learned, and that's how he became our high priest, is because he can relate to everything. He can relate to how difficult it is to be human. So your experiences now are helping you know that it is difficult to be human, and it's still possible to make it. I'm so grateful for you and Tim. I have learned so much from you all, and you are a shining light for me. Well, Felicia, I'm so glad, and that you're encouraged. And I just want you to know that every single one of you is valuable. You may not understand your value, but it doesn't mean you're not valuable. And unless you're able to say that I'm valuable to God and Yehovah, I have trust issues with Yehovah, but I want to trust and choose that he's good, and ask for salve for your eyes once an hour. Breathe once an hour. Set your little watch and say, Father, I choose that you're good. Please help put salve on my eyes to see your goodness, and to understand what you're like and what I'm like to you, and the specialness I am to you, to help stabilize me. If you do that, and you do it on a regular basis, I promise you he does show up. It might take some time for you to see the difference. It took time for me to do this and see a difference, but he will show up. Those that diligently seek him will find him. If you give up, you've lost your diligence. If you're weak and upset, and you're kind of complaining about your circumstances, or complaining about who you are and what you are, you might have some difficulties. So it's time to pick up in courage. Pick up your courage. Put your courage on. and choose to walk and do something, instead of becoming weak and doing less and less. Push into God. Keep pushing. I mean, what else do you have? If you give up, then you become just like a robot. You are a non-living on the inside, dead on the inside, and still going through the motions of life, but you're just going through the motions of life. So it's time to allow your insides to be revived, and they have to be touched. And the only way they're touched is when you ask, because Father, he lets you have free will. He only comes in if you really want him to. And supposedly we said, Father, it is not our life any longer. We give our lives to you. You can do with it what you want, and we will trust you that it's the best. Now, it's just like a marriage. You have no idea what you just signed up for or what Father will allow you to go through. And just like marriage, you find out with time, and you go through easy times and hard times and all kinds of times, for those of you who are married. For those that are not married, take any relationship you've ever had, It goes through all kinds of times. It's just that's the way it is. So that's the same thing on the narrow path walk. We're learning how to interact with Father in His way, and we can do it. We've got lots of stories here that show that it can be done, and we have our own testimonies. All of you have a testimony, so you can testify of how God has been in you and He's untrustable, and you can stick with that or say, I feel like He's untrustable, and I'm really, really hurt, and I want salve for my eyes, and I want healing in my heart, and I'm going to push into it. I want to see differently. I want to see differently, and I want to walk on that narrow path of choosing to see differently and be courageous by looking at things and Goliaths and not losing heart, but saying, okay, Father's going to help me. So I hope that helps all of you. I just really genuinely thank you for showing up, and feel free to leave us message, putting this on your Facebook wall or on social media and sharing with others helps me out so that other people can be encouraged. So you can do that. And of course, many of you have already done it, but you can subscribe to this channel and know when I'm live. I'm doing it probably more often now. I think I'll probably stay that way because it seems like it's really fun and everybody likes it that way. And it's nice to just kind of like interact a little bit easier and better when I'm actually on. Then, there's no reason not to do them live. We all need to have our minds and hearts healed, and you're doing a lot to help in that regard. And that is what Jehovah wants for you through Yeshua. That is the hope He was trying to give you. That everything you're going through, He brings meaning by redeeming you. You are bought back. You are a son of God, the creator of everything. You are bought back. And so you can walk in that, even if right now we're walking in a foreign land and we're having a foreign land experience where we're not treated well, does not mean we're abandoned. It just means that we're learning. We're here on a mission to learn. That's what this life's about. And it's to learn how to love no matter what. No matter what. No matter what. That means loving God no matter what. Loving our neighbor no matter what. Loving ourselves no matter what. That's the narrow path. Okay? So I hope that's helpful. I just love all of you. Feel free to go to Escape All These Things and see all of our other great newsletters and things that we have for free up there. And if you'd love to, many of you actually are supporters, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I thank you for everyone else that sees this, because it's because of you we have just enough finances to be able to eat and to do what we need to do so that we can put out free content like this and spend time sharing with other people and trying to encourage you and others onto good work. So thank you. You're reaching and helping a lot of people this way, and you are appreciated. I want you to know you are appreciated. All right. So blessings to all of you, and this has been great. Thank you for showing up, and hopefully I'll be able to put something up again tomorrow after I've come back from helping my son move. So I bless you all, and may you have a great evening. All right, I'm going to let you go. Mwah! Bye.